This is the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we cover all things men's basketball. In the Ancient Eight, we are your hub, your go-to, your day one. But not really, though. I'm your co-host, Coach Sidney Johnson, former head coach of the Princeton Tigers from 2007 to 2011 and former three-time captain of the Tigers in 95, 96, and 97. I'm joined each and every week by my guy, Princeton alum and former Princeton graduate assistant coach, Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler. Lawrence, how you making out?
It's cold out here.
It certainly is, but we have a hot show. How about that one? We have Vince Curran joining us, UPenn broadcaster, former student athlete as well, to give us a look in on the Penn Quakers playing outstanding basketball this season. And John Solomon, our chief in-game correspondent, joins us to give his take on the Princeton Tigers as he has taken a front row seat with the Tigers all season long. And our student athlete interview is none other than Yale's all-time leading three-point scorer, Azar Swain. Please stick around for that one. You don't want to miss it. Let's get into the show. All right, folks, we're back at it with My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, our weekly review of games that were in the Ancient Eight. And we're going to rely on John Solomon, once again, our chief in-game correspondent. I've got my partner with me, L. Boogie Schuler. But John, tell us about that Princeton game as we start off with the games that were in the Ancient Eight.
Well, Coach, there were a lot of compelling contests around the Ivy League on Saturday, but unfortunately for Dartmouth, their game was not one of them. Princeton got their coach back from COVID protocols, their fans back in Jadwin Gym after playing the past month with limited attendance, and most importantly, defense back in their strongest performance of conference play, never trailing on their way to a thorough 85-40 win. The Tigers made a point of establishing Tosan Iwoman inside early, who recorded the home team's first 6 points before Dartmouth got on the board. Tosan actually single-handedly outscored the Big Green in the first half, 15-13. Tosan's handoff screen to Jalen Llewellyn on the arc made it 11-4 Princeton. Dartmouth leading scorer Brendan Barry had to seriously work to get his looks against tough Tiger man-to-man defense, not making a three-pointer for the first time this season. And a lot of the credit there goes to Ryan Langborg and Ethan Wright defensively in particular. Llewellyn crossed over Nikola Dimitrovic and connected on a three-pointer at the top of the arc with no time remaining for a gaudy 43-13 Tiger advantage at the break. Dartmouth shot 4 for 23 from the field and 0 for 8 from deep in the first 20 minutes. The benches already started to empty with 16:26 left in the game. Dartmouth's lone made three-pointer out of 20 attempts came with under 3 minutes to go, and it was the biggest conference margin of defeat for the Big Green since a 116-42 loss to Princeton back in 1967.
Wow. All right. Well, Tigers getting back to their awesome form that they showed in the pre-conference. And not that they haven't played well, but that was surely a dominant performance. Do you think the defensive focus there, John, was something that Coach Henderson emphasized and keyed on? And do you think that that will hold to make them a bit stronger team moving forward?
I would say defense and making a concerted effort to get off to a better start than Princeton has in other games recently. But man, if the Tigers defend like they did on Saturday the rest of the way, they're going to be in good shape. And I noticed they improved 30 plus slots defensively in Pomeroy due to this game alone.
Wow.
They went up from around 300 to the 260s and skyrocketed in the standings accordingly. But yeah, I mean, the competition gets a lot tougher and a lot more on the road these next few weeks, but it certainly was encouraging to see, especially compared to the way the previous meeting played out in Hanover.
Well, let's pick up on, as you said, there are stiffer contests that are waiting, and some of those games were played out, in the rest of the league. I'm looking at Cornell and Brown, a shocking big road win. I'm saying shocking from the standpoint of how it went down. Jalen Gainey powers through with an offensive rebound dunk that was outstanding. But I was shocked at how many points just in general Brown was able to put up. I mentioned last week, I said Cornell was averaging 82 points per game at home versus Division I opponents. Brown hadn't reached that number except for 2 games in conference play. Well, Brown records 81 points, and they top Cornell 81-80 with a huge win in Ithaca. They were extremely aggressive, the Bears were, against Cornell, and it worked. They grabbed 14 rebounds offensively, a huge number. They drew 27 fouls on the Big Red, and they went to the line, guys, for a season-high 31 free throws. Cornell has only yielded more free throws in a single game to one other opponent, and that was the Yale game that I watched in person in New Haven, where the Big Red were bullied to a 27-point thrashing. So giving up that many free throws is kind of putting your back up against the wall, and it turned out to bite the Big Red. A huge win. How did you guys respond to that Brown Cornell 81-80 victory on the road?
Brown was up big for much of the game, and Cornell kept closing, and it felt like one of those games just following along while I was at Jadwin, that once Cornell got up, they were going to stay up, and obviously they could never make it more than one possession, and just a heck of a play by Gainey to, I mean, let's be honest, basically save Brown's season.
Mm-hmm. To me, he's Defensive Player of the Year. I think that's an easy one. Is he worthy of Team Ivy honors? I'm going to throw out there and say not quite, but I'm just wondering, what you guys might say. Well, I'll give you mine. I've got Tosan. I've got Azar. I've got Jordan Dingle. I've got Noah Kirkwood. The 5th spot, I believe you reward winning. So if Yale wins it, I'm going to go Cho. All right. That's my first 5. Then I'm going to go Gabadon. I'm going to go Ethan Wright. I'm going to go Brendan Barry. I'm going to go Chris Mannon, Cornell. And I'm going to go Jalen Llewellyn. So that's my 10 right there. So that's why I don't have Jalen Gainey in there. Does he knock out any of those 10?
Not to be glib, but ask me next Monday. There's some big games ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've got Princeton at home on Friday, Penn at home on Saturday. They go 2-0 there, and he puts up big numbers, and you can reshuffle that deck. It's hard to get Gainey on that second team when you consider that 3 of those 10 slots are almost certainly going to go to Tosan, Ethan Wright, and Jalen Llewellyn. Then if you assume you have Dingle, Swain, and Kirkwood and Cho in the mix, now you've got 3 spaces. And you have to assume that someone from Cornell, whether it's Mannon or Knoll, will end up there. Probably another Yale guy, Gabadon, and Brendan Barry. That's 11 already. And Gainey's on the outside of that list looking in. You've seen it in the past where you reward a Defensive Player of the Year, and if you give someone that title, it frees up another slot for All Ivy or
that's basically
Newcomer of the Year.
That's what I was thinking exactly. Because I would argue Keno Lilly Jr. is certainly not top 5. Is he potentially second teamer? Maybe. Definitely will get honorable All Ivy. He's really good. But I think you give yourself an out by saying, hey, Freshman of the Year, Lilly, Defensive Player of the Year, Gainey, and then you have a few more spots to play with. Penn and Harvard. Wow, this was a heck of a matchup, and it was nip and tuck the entire time. 2 minutes to go. Noah Kirkwood hits a step-back 3 to knot the game at 71-71. The Quakers run the shot clock down, and who are they going to get the ball to? Of course, none other than Jordan Dingle, who's looking like a Player of the Year candidate by the game. Coach Donahue and Dingle wave everyone off. Literally, Dingle gets the ball. He's dribbling up near the coach's box mark, and Donahue is waving guys away, like essentially 1-4 low. Dingle does the same thing. Wisely, Harvard's Mason Forbes, who's been playing more and more and giving the Crimson some sense of a front court along with Cale Catchings, he runs over to assist Kirkwood, and this is a side mention. I love the fact that Kirkwood was guarding Dingle and Dingle at times was guarding Kirkwood. So you had another one of those matchups head to head instead of just sharing the court. They were going at it. But Forbes comes over to assist his buddy. What does Dingle do? He takes 2 dribbles at the double team, the impending Mason Forbes, and crosses back to his right, takes 2 more dribbles and shoots a 3-point shot that banks off of the backboard, hits the rim, and rolls in, somehow stays on the inside lip of the rim and drops down. Kirkwood turns to the Crimson bench in complete exasperation, actually holds his hands up, and I think literally was staring at Coach Amaker like, WTF, excuse my language. Harvard misses a 3 to tie it, and Penn steals a page out of the Princeton playbook, guys. The next trip down, they actually get a backdoor cut for Dingle. He finally cuts versus pressure instead of coming around. He catches and gathers. Weak side defender comes over. He fires a pass over to George Smith, who knocks down a wide open 3, and they salt the game away. Huge win for the Penn Quakers. Much, much better than I projected them going into conference play. They're playing outstanding basketball. I'll say it again. I think Steve Donahue has been the coach of the year, but I'll take a page from John's book and say so far. And I want to note a couple of contributors for the Quakers because it's often the Jordan Dingle show, but Lucas Monroe was superb for the Quakers. Started for them his defensive intensity, his rebounding, athleticism, and his competitive nature. He was getting grimy and getting after it, showing a lot of emotion. I love to see it. 9.7 rebounds. And Clark Slackert, we highlighted him in a matchup between him and Swain earlier in the season. He was perfect from the 3-point line, 2 for 2, 26 minutes played off the bench. And the sophomore, again, in his first year of Ivy play, continued to help out the Quakers. So big result there. What say you guys in terms of the Penn Quakers and how well they're playing?
Well, this time the team that shot 53% from the floor at home won as compared to the prior game we were talking about. But it was interesting that the Philadelphia Inquirer, with some of the attendance restrictions lifted at the Palestra, said that for many Quakers, this game against Harvard was their first college experience with a true home crowd advantage. And Penn doesn't play, they have 2 more home games the rest of the way. But, they're figuring out some of the protocols and the way to have these games played with a few more people safely. And I know I felt it at Jadwin on Saturday. It felt more like college basketball to me than it really had at any point so far this season, even though we're midway through the month.
Is the Palestra the ideal place to have Ivy Madness year in and year out? Vince Curran brought that up, and he had a compelling argument. I mean, the environment, the setting there, obviously you're talking about Penn fans rooting hard for the Quakers, but just in general, you got the history there, the location, the acoustics of it. I'm a Princeton guy through and through, but I don't know if there's any other gym in the league that can give you the environment that the Palestra can for big-time basketball games. And I'm probably separating myself from a number of very good coaches in the league, but it's hard to argue. But please argue with me if you think otherwise. What would you say, John and Lawrence, if the Ivy League tournament was at the Palestra year in and year out?
I think you can do it and have it be fun and have it be rollicking at 3.5 to 4 of the 7 locations. So I'm not sure it should be in Philadelphia every year. I mean, again, like you said, it's hard to beat many of the things you're talking about. But I happen to remember a game played in New Haven, Connecticut for an Ivy League title that had a pretty fantastic environment about 11 years ago. And I'd put that up against anything the Palestra had to offer. Look, I like the Palestra a ton, but a full Payne Whitney gym, that's my favorite place to see a game when it's crowded of the Ivy venues. Also, I mean, part of that is because, I mean, that there's nowhere for the sound to go. 2,500 people in New Haven can sound like 4,500 people in Philadelphia.
One more thing.
We have to mention Yale's dominance of Columbia, but that's about it. I mean, it just a team that really knows what they're trying to do and who they are, and Columbia that's, struggling to kind of keep scrapping and fight. And we'll see if they have a win or two left in them. But right now, Yale's not slowing down.
That was a close game for a bit there. I mean, it was 5-point game with 3:42 left in the first half. And then Yale got it to 9 at the break. And when play resumed, I mean, we've talked about it a bit. I mean, Columbia did close to 39-37. And then over the next 17 minutes, we end up at 84-59.
You got to give them credit because they're showing up and they're trying to do what they can do. But I'll put it, not to disparage Coach Engels and his staff and the guys who are giving everything. I'll put it on me. I'll talk to you guys really quick about my experience at the Air Force Academy. We won 5 games last year. And Joe Scott has done an outstanding job in this second year. He's already doubled that amount of wins. So they've already got 10 wins this season, and they're on the upward swing. But I know our feeling as a coaching staff that we had efforts like this where sometimes we were close at the half and then boom. Sometimes we get blown out right away. Sometimes, like, all different ways to come up short. And the point is, to put it bluntly, we couldn't give two strong halves. And that's what Columbia is struggling with. It's a 40-minute game, and playing well for 2 halves is the challenge for this team. And once they accomplish that, they'll get their wins.
Our next guest is a member of the Pennsylvania Quakers class of 1992, an alumnus of Penn's Wharton School and School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and native of Villanova, Pennsylvania. He's a Philly guy through and through. As a high school senior at St. Joe's Prep, he was named the 1987 Marquardt Award winner for the most outstanding player in Philadelphia's renowned Catholic League, and was named by the Philadelphia Inquirer as one of St. Joe's Prep's all-time 5 best players. After St. Joe's, he emerged as a standout power forward and center, as a member of the first generation of Penn Quakers to play for head coach and Big Five legend Fran Dunphy. In his senior season, he averaged 11 points per game and ranked in the top 5 in the Ivy League in rebounding and steals, and top 10 in true shooting percentage. Among his accomplishments off the court, he's the founder of Palestra Real Estate Partners and was an executive producer for The Mighty Macs, a film about the 1972 Immaculata College women's basketball championship team, starring Carla Gugino, David Boreanaz, and Oscar-winning actress Ellen Burstyn. Having served as a player and later an assistant coach for the Quakers, he has, since the 2005-2006 season, served as the full-time color analyst on Penn men's basketball broadcasts and a contributor for other major college basketball outlets, including Comcast, the Mountain West, and Atlantic 10 networks. Please welcome the voice of the Pennsylvania men's basketball Quakers, the sound of Philadelphia, people all over the world, wearing 00, Vince Curran. Vince, welcome to the show.
I am happy to be here, fellas. I really appreciate you having me on. And I can tell you, Lawrence, if my epithet gets written anytime soon, I think I want you to write
it. Vince, great to have you on the show. Lawrence and I have truly enjoyed covering the Ivy League and bouncing back our own thoughts. But I have to say, there's so many people who love the Ivy League, love their programs. There's no truer Penn Quaker than yourself. And so we want to start with the program, but then we're obviously going to talk a lot about your own, history with the program, your own experiences. But let's start right now with Steve Donahue and the Penn Quakers. You can help us kick off our segment of My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, where we look at the games and just how and why are the Penn Quakers playing so well. And let's start with this recent game, a huge win and matchup against the Harvard Crimson.
Yeah, earlier in the year, Steve said to me, we're sitting in the locker room before a game, he said, we need to figure out a way to have us not be just Jordan Dingle on offense. And I think that's why Penn is playing as well as they are. I mean, let's just say it right now. Dingle has been spectacular.
Yeah.
Game starts, he's okay, put Dingle down for 30, right? It seems like he's going again and again and again. And he's hitting big shots, and he's attacking, and he's doing all the things you need him to do. But you got Max Martz for the last month until he didn't play Saturday against Harvard, had been really consistent, double-digit scorer, close to double-digit rebounds. Clark Slacker playing that role coming off the bench that in Penn's championship season a couple years back that Caleb Wood played. He comes in, he makes big shots. Now, Wood, I think, was a little bit more of a three-point shooter. And Clark has, even though he hits 2 big threes in the first half against Harvard, he's more of a slasher, get to the basket, little nifty stuff inside. But, the role is similar. So I think one of the reasons why Penn is playing as well as they are, I'm not going to give you 2 reasons. Dingle's been awesome, right? But everybody else has stepped up around him. It's different guys on different nights. But, the 2 guys I just mentioned, Martz and Slacker, have really been consistent scorers that have given Penn some other options. And then you get George Smith, who goes for 23 in his first Ivy League game against Brown. And you get Moskovitz, who plays really well with the ball and without, and has a bunch of double-digit rebound performances. All of those things have kind of funneled into why I think Penn is playing as well as they are.
That's a perfect breakdown, because I have to say, and this isn't like a Princeton Penn thing. This is just kind of me pulling back and looking at all 8 teams and looking at Princeton earlier in the year. I'm like, there's a team, when they're playing pretty well against Minnesota and South Carolina and other games, I'm going, that's a team that looks like an NCAA tournament team potentially. When I looked at Penn, and I know that the schedule was brutal, and we've been talking about that all year on the pod, but I was like, they still got some things to work out, because even though it's a brutal schedule and I know they're taking some losses, they didn't look like an NCAA tournament team. Now they're looking like one of the best teams in the league. And I'd ask you, do you think the Quakers are the best team in the league?
Well, one of the things that you talked about earlier in the year for Penn, you thought you were going to have Max Lorca-Lloyd as your starting center. You thought you were going to have Michael Wong as a guy who would be your starting power forward. So in addition to being a murderer's row of a schedule, right? I talked to Phil Samko, Penn's longtime trainer, and we could play great and be 1-10, right? That's what that schedule looked like early.
No doubt.
Now, then you have the injuries that you now need to figure it out. And I've mentioned on our broadcast probably 20 times the end of the Utah State game where Dingle goes up for the 3 and comes down, the defender jumps into him. That shouldn't have gone to double overtime. That game should have ended right there. Jordan Dingle has 3 free throws to win the game. I think it took Penn a little time to recover from that trip to Myrtle Beach, because you had a bunch of things that went wrong for you. So, yeah, I do think that they are an NCAA level team. I think you've got the star quality. I think you've got the complementary pieces to it. And, I think when I talked to James Jones, when they came into the Palestra a couple weeks back, he said, it looks like the league's starting to take shape. And the top 3 have kind of separated themselves a little bit, and there's some head scratchers. I didn't think Harvard would be 3-6 in the league. I didn't, I thought Brown might be a little bit better, because I really liked their first 3 and frankly their first 5.
Me too.
And I think Brian's doing a great job at Cornell, as he always does. So there you go, Sydney. I'm going to give a little love to a Princeton guy.
I know that pains you.
Yep. So I think he's doing a terrific job as well. So you look at it, and obviously heading into Friday at Yale, they're all big weekends at this point.
Yeah.
But you got the battle for first place on Friday night. You got 2 of the top players in Swain and Dingle that are going to be battling it out. We're going to know more next week. But yeah, I think Penn is quality enough to be able to win the league, and obviously, I wouldn't discount your alma mater either. I think they're playing extremely well. Couple head scratchers that you look at and go, what happened in this case? But frankly, when Cornell and Princeton play one another, I think Brian really does a really good job of game planning for his alma mater, which is no surprise, right? You start coaching there, you know the system, you know the players, you know the coaches, and he always seems to get his guys up for that game. So if it's Cornell as the fourth team in the playoff, if it's Brown in the fourth team in the playoffs, it wouldn't surprise me if any one of those teams ended up winning. And if Harvard somehow gets in there too, that wouldn't surprise me if they ended up winning the tournament. So I think one of the things, having had a full year off like that, there's been so much turnover and there's been so many things where you look at it and say, these teams just don't look like what they used to look like. I don't think it's parity as much as I think it's almost like the NFL any given Sunday. Any given night, top to bottom, I think the teams are closer than they have been in a long time. There's not one team you go, oh, yeah, forget it, right? That team's the best team by a ton. And because of that, you've had a bunch of close games this year. Everything seems to be coming down to the wire. And, of the 6 teams that you would say are probably still alive for the tournament, any one of them could win it.
Yeah. One more question before I swing it over to Lawrence. Vince, we have to talk about Steve Donahue. Like, we have to. I mean, I just think, not discounting anything that you said, but this team, you talk about the injuries, you talk about the brutal schedule. You've coached, it's really freaking hard to keep a team together when you're battling, and you're not getting the results that you want. And to keep the team focused on, the light at the end of the tunnel and all the analogy, you've been in the trenches. Steve Donahue and staff have coached their tails off to get this team playing good basketball. To your point, get this team to be more than the Jordan Dingle show, which is really hard to do because the kid's incredible. I mean, you're there. Please enlighten us. I think he's the coach of the year. No one's going to tell me anything different. But please share with us a little bit of the magic dust that you get to see game in and game out as it relates to Donahue and the staff.
The thing that kind of jumps out at me is, Steve's offense is fantastic. He's from the Fran O'Hanlon school of offensive basketball. You could put a bunch of guys out there, and he's going to get them open looks. He's going to get them good shots. A.J. Broder, to Steve's credit, was a different player, and he adjusted the offense around him. Now you look at Dingle, and you say, oh, well, you know what? That guy's going to need to score a lot for us. Our offense is really going to need to be focused on him. And you look back at Steve's Cornell teams, and it was a little more spread out, right? Yeah, Lewis Dale was doing one thing. Ryan Whitman was doing another thing. Jeff Foote was doing another thing. They had every role player imaginable, and Steve pulled all the levers to kind of let those guys do what they do. Now he's made an adjustment that I think really has helped them. Is, okay, we have acknowledged that Dingle is going to be the guy that that takes the majority of the shots in this offense. I think in a perfect world, Steve would spread it out a little bit more, but he's figured out that piece of it, and he's gotten the other guys playing off him to the point where you have all of those contributors. And it's a lot like the championship season of a couple years ago with, A.J. Broder was your main guy, but I brought up Caleb Wood before you, Darnell Foreman, who was fantastic. Ryan Betley is almost like the forgotten Quaker at this point. Everybody forgets how good he was before that knee injury.
Yeah,
right? That's one of the things that changed, I think, the trajectory of that team and A.J. Broder's leadership over the course of those years. So I agree with you. Steve and his staff have done a fantastic job coaching up this team. But the thing that I have seen is they're playing a little bit differently based on their personnel, right? It's not, hey, this is my way, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to fit these 12 guys or 8 guys that are in the rotation into doing it my way. This is more of a, here are my pieces, and this is the way I can best figure out how to win. And the hard part, and Sydney, as you just said a little bit ago, all the injuries, is that it's changed over the course of the year, right? You start off and say, okay, I'm going to have these 2 bigs, and they're going to play this way, and then we'll kind of figure it out this way. You game plan for the entire year, and all of a sudden, 2 guys that you would have thought that are going to play 25 to 30 minutes a night aren't playing. So now you got to figure it out. And like I look at a kid like Max Martz and say, man, he's not a power forward, right? But he's playing power forward, and he's rebounding like a madman, and he defends, and he's healthier, and he's kind of rounded into that role. that's a great piece for Steve, and he's identified it that way, and he's put guys in the right positions. Now, and this is, I'm not casting any aspersions at Mitch right now, but the other guy who put in the conversation is James Jones in terms of Coach of the Year, just because, like, I look at that Yale team, and you go, it's not that super talented Jordan Bruner, the teams
Paul
with
Atkinson,
right.
Swain,
I mean, you look at it and go, and James has them looking and acting and believing like they're as good as any other Yale team that's won a title in the last 10 years, and they play like that. They got a little something to them. So I think James has really elevated his group as well, right? So, like, those would be the two guys, if you're going to say, in the conversation. But, at this point, there's still a little basketball left to be played. And I think it'll shake itself out over the course of the next couple weekends.
Vince, let's take a look back at Penn in historical perspective, and let's do it by way of putting together a Vince Curran reel. Can you give us 3 games that you played in or that you called on air that our listeners should watch?
Oh, gosh. 3 games that I played in or called on air. Well, I wasn't, unlike Sydney, my playing career was not all that memorable. So the played-in games probably, Dump's first game, would be, we played Lehigh at the Palestra. In terms of a personal one for me, that would probably be it. We had some good wins over the course of our time there, and we built on some things. We got significantly better after I graduated, so I'll leave it at that. In terms of the games that always stick out to me, the Penn-Princeton rivalry over the course of the years has been just fantastic. I always bring up Brian Earl's 35-8 game where he just about single-handedly brings Princeton back when they're down 35-8 at halftime, and just methodically. I mean, he was an assassin. Everybody looks at him now. You see this, this nice kid who, seems like, hey, yeah, I could hang it with Brian Earl. He might kill you in your sleep, right? I mean, he was that kind of player. So compliments to him. I always enjoyed watching him play, and I do like watching his teams play. In terms of other games over the course of the years, the Judson Wallace game where he, it says afterwards, he said, hey, we're going to win the league, I guarantee it. As a Penn guy, kind of like making him eat his words a little bit. I can't remember what year that was, Sid. You might be able to help me with that one.
I know that was John. That was definitely John Thompson those years, but I have to figure that coach wasn't too happy about that because he definitely put the bullseye, on their back. I don't know what he was thinking. And yeah, he deserved to eat it, right? I mean, that
happens, right?
Yeah,
and when your rival school, and I'm sure there are other moments. I remember when in the playoff game at Lehigh, when Tim Krug fouled off and he was walking off the court, and he's kind of waving at the Princeton fans, saying, "Yeah, we're going to win the game," and Princeton got it that year. So over a lot of years watching it and a lot of years doing it, the rivalry games always tend to stick out. Frankly, I also remember when James Jones came to Yale and in his opening press conference said he was going to stick his foot up Penn and Princeton's rear end. It's like, oh, okay, well, now you look back at it, and James is pretty much right. If they had an Ivy League tournament in all the years he's been there, the only year he would have missed it would have been his first year, actually last year since they didn't have the tournament. But he has been remarkably consistent over the course of his time, and say, okay, well, you look at him and say, that kind of stirred the pot a little bit. And I think it was good. I think Harvard and Yale elevating their programs has certainly helped the league as a whole. So the 4 teams, you say, okay, Penn, Princeton, now Harvard and Yale have elevated it. But by Harvard and Yale elevating, the other 4 teams have been forced to elevate it.
Yeah.
And, I think the quality of basketball across the league has gotten a lot better over the course of the last 10 or 15 years.
I have to jump in and say, Vince, concerning what you just said, and it's a great kind of layout of maybe even the modern evolution of Ivy League basketball. Are you a fan of the Ivy Madness as it currently is, top 4 teams? And 2, do you ever see Ivy Madness extending out to all 8 games? And what would you think of that?
So I like the Ivy Madness. You talk about memorable games. When Jackson Donahue hits a 3 against Harvard to get Penn into that initial Ivy Madness. That's another one that sticks out in my head. I do like it. Do I think it could be done better? Yeah, I think it could be done better, right? I think rotating the sites doesn't make a lot of sense to me. if you're going to try and make it a, surprise, coming from a Penn guy, if you're going to try and make it a material conference tournament event, it should be at the Palestra. You can get 9,000 people in there. The energy those first couple years was fantastic, right? And I get you could argue, Jadwin's big enough to do it as well. If I were wearing a different hat, I'd say, yeah, Jadwin's fine too. But having it at Yale a couple years ago, I was like, oh, really? It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like a big time event. It felt like, okay, it's just another game.
And Vince, like call it what it is. I mean, Jadwin's not going to have the energy that the Palestra is going to have, and it's a beautiful building. But you keep going. Let's be real. The Palestra is going to create the best environment.
Yeah, and it's funny because when they were talking about having different venues host it, you hear the arguments against it, right? Like coaches saying, oh, well, I'm at a disadvantage if it's at the Palestra, right? And by the way, speaking of another one that I would put on my top list was, Penn beating Harvard in the final at the Palestra. Normally I had the headset on, but, when Darnell Foreman hits the three at the end of the first half, it was as loud as I've ever heard the building. And like that kind of energy and that kind of atmosphere, I think is good for the league and is good for the branding, and it's good for what you see. And I will say this, and I've not spoken to Tommy Amaker about this, but this is what I've heard. He said, look, if we're going to have, I'm paraphrasing, if we're going to have a real conference tournament with a real conference tournament feel, it's got to be there, right? Now, other coaches felt differently, and I'm going on hearsay, but like having somebody like that say, for the good of the league, the best thing to do is to have it in a venue where you can have, Sydney, to your point, that kind of energy and that kind of enthusiasm and that kind of coverage and media and all of the things that last tournament at the Palestra had, I think is better for the long-term health of the league. But anybody hearing me say is, well, you're a Penn guy. Of course you think that, right? But the ACC had their tournaments in North Carolina for however many years. Was it an advantage for North Carolina and Duke and maybe NC State? Sure it was. But it became an event. It became a big-time TV event that, frankly, half the time was better than some of the NCAA tournament games. So I think that Philadelphia got behind it. It had about 7,000 for that game against Harvard, and it looked good. It sounded good. The energy was great. I don't think it's going to happen, right? I think that at some point there may be another change to how it goes, to the rotation, but I think that would be great. And frankly, I would love to see it stay kind of the way it is. Top four getting in has filled the right role, right? It says, okay, let's have a conference tournament, but let's still have the regular season mean something. And every year, it's come down to that last weekend where one team needs to win to get in or needs a big play to get in. And yeah, I think that's been pretty cool. So I like that aspect of it and wouldn't expand it to all 18. I would, as a traditionalist, was a fan of the 14-game tournament, but I also get the idea of the conference tournament and adding exposure and giving kids more games to play in. So I would keep it as it is at 4 teams and go from there.
Vince, this is awesome. Box office gold, honestly, because you've kind of blended, really, like you're traditionalist. There's no one who knows more about Penn basketball, Ivy League basketball, and yet your fresh perspective of saying, hey, top 4 works, and the lens of looking at the Palestra is potentially the best venue year in and year out. We haven't had that on the show, and frankly, I think it's enhanced the conversation. I think you're right. I can independently confirm what Amaker has been possibly quoted as saying. I've heard that from other sources, so I'm glad you brought it on. This has been awesome to have you on. I mean, obviously the Penn feel, but also, like I said, you just experienced so much as a player, as a coach, and on the sidelines now broadcasting. And as we close this out, and you've been gracious enough to join me and Lawrence, I want to ask you, moving forward, is there something beyond what we just talked about, something else that could occur on the Penn campus, on the Ancient Eight campuses, basketball, academically, socially, anything that you would like to see that would really bring a positive contribution to Ivy League basketball, men's basketball in particular?
From a conference standpoint, add Army and Navy, right?
Okay.
We're in this situation now, and Penn always had the advantage of, in January, they'd play St. Joe's and they'd play Temple. Now, you look at it, and if you're starting the Ivy League season in first weekend of January, you're really spreading those games out. You need 18 conference games if you're going to do this, right? And from my perspective, they're the only two schools that have the academic pedigree and are geographically desirable. So that would be one thing. Now, believe me, I know that's a stretch, but and I'm not saying there's not another two schools that are out there. Those are the ones that always come to the top of my mind. But have 18 Ivy League games, right? That way you're not searching for games. That way you're not playing home-and-home games with teams 3 days apart from one another because you can't find games to play in, right? So I think there needs to be some level of that. Otherwise, the Ivy League season gets so spread out. Like, watching Jordan Dingle play one game in 13 days, that's no good, right? You need to see more of it. So that would be one thing. I would look at figuring out if there is a set of schools. You need two more. Those are the ones that I always go back to. If you have a fuller slate of games, then you're not so jammed up in November where Penn's playing 13 games in 19 days or whatever. It was some absurd number, where they're jamming so much into that early part of the season. Then you're off for 3 weeks, and then you go right into the league season, and it's all spread out again. So from a conference perspective, from a geographic standpoint, from a level of basketball standpoint, and from an academic pedigree standpoint, you could see somebody making an argument that those two schools would be a great fit and would help round out the conference schedule.
I absolutely love it. And I've actually never pondered that or heard of it. And just ending on that, Vince, we're going to have to hook you in and bring you back. All right. And talk more about that and other things, men's basketball. Are you good with that?
I would love to come back. I'll give you one more on the way out. Pay the officials better so you get better crews on Saturdays.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
I think that's the other thing. We have these weekly whistles that I watch, and that, half the times I go, I'm not sure if these officials watch that. So I think that's one more. If you're going to have Saturday games and you want to be at the top of the food chain, pay the guys, get good crews in there, and get better calls on Saturday night.
Hope the league office is listening. I know our fans of the show are listening, and obviously fans of the program. And Vince, you've represented Penn basketball and Ivy League basketball excellently well. We appreciate you having some time for us on the pod. And on behalf of Lawrence and myself, can't thank you enough, Vince. We'll be sure to bring you back.
My pleasure, guys. Looking forward to it.
Our next guest on the Ivy League Hoops Hour was a standout two-sport athlete at the Rivers School located in Weston, Massachusetts, before choosing to bring his talents to New Haven, Connecticut, and lead the Yale men's basketball team. His durability from day one for head coach James Jones has been unquestioned, as he has spent his first 2 seasons appearing in every game on the Bulldogs' schedule. Not only did he get on the court consistently, but he shined, finishing 11th in the Ivies in three-point percentage as a freshman, finishing 7th in the Ivies in three-point makes as a sophomore, and notching 108 made three-pointers in his first 2 seasons. But those were just the warm-up, as our guest was recognized as a first-team All-Ivy selection in his junior campaign of 2019-20. Making 93 three-pointers by himself, folks, and is well on his way to first-team All-Ivy honors in his senior season as the league's second leading scorer and top 20 finishes in rebounding, assists, field goal percentage, three-point percentage, steals, and minutes played. We have the sensational scoring guard for the Yale Bulldogs, who are 2-time Ivy League defending champs, by the way, Azar Swain. Azar, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you for the kind intro.
Well, like I tell everyone, week in and week out, it's all true, man. So we want to share some love with you and appreciate you being on the show with us. As always, week in and week out, I'm joined by my co-host, Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler. So, Azar, I'm going to jump in, and I'll start with the River School, two-sport athlete there, and yet another product of the NEPSAC. We've had a number of student athletes who've been on the show and joined us, who are products of the New England Prep School Athletic Council. And as a star football and basketball player, and your Massachusetts Gatorade Player of the Year as a senior in basketball, but then also the all-time touchdown leader in the River Schools program history. So many trainers, parents, coaches, they want players to specialize and focus their efforts on only one sport. I'd love to hear from you the advantages that you think competing in two sports, football and basketball, and you did that throughout your entire high school career. What kind of effect did that have on your development? And then also maybe some of the challenges in terms of competing in both during those high school years.
Well, just to start with the challenges, to play both to try to play both at a high level, which I was trying to do in high school. The schedules of AAU and practices of basketball are so time consuming. So it was difficult through high school, especially in my later years. But, it was truly, never a burden to me. It was just my life. I grew up, my dad was so passionate about both sports, introduced me to the game, both games very early. And I fell in love with both. Football is actually my first love. And, I'm deeply invested and interested in the sport. But I mean, as far as like the positives when it comes to the translation between the sports and how that kind of translate onto the court, I believe it's kind of instilled a certain level of, you kind of touched on a little bit, durability and toughness. Where I might think that I have a higher pain tolerance than most people. And I'm not sure if that's because of football and the things that I might have gone through playing football. But I feel like amongst a lot of parents, there's a lot of skepticism toward getting your kid into playing football, or if you're playing basketball, then you only need to be focused on basketball. But a lot of the skills and footwork and certain like elusive moves that you use on the court actually translate directly to the field and vice versa. Some of the same moves that I use on the court, I used to use to get open as a wide receiver. And that's true facts. And that's something that me and my dad developed over the years and honed in on, especially my senior year of football in high school. My senior year of high school is truly one of my biggest and proudest accomplishments of my life. And, I wasn't really in it at that point to go to college for football, but I just love it so much. And it is truly amazing to still have that type of accomplishment, leading my high school in touchdowns, to have that attached to my name is something that I'll never take for granted.
A quick follow-up on that. One, did you start to gain college interest, and were there scholarship opportunities there to play football? And then also, I think you nailed it. I think that, again, coaches, trainers, parents, they miss that there are actual skill sets from other sports that can enhance, say, your, quote, primary sport. Can you also touch on just hearing a different voice and different challenges in terms of what your football coach is asking that could probably help you with basketball?
Yeah, it's a lot of the same things. I feel like football kind of shaped my mind and mentality towards sports. I played football ever since I could remember, truly a little kid. So that was really my true introduction to a team sport. You have a bunch of kids on the team who are playing their own roles and different things like that. So that was like true introduction to kind of what a team needs to be in, and that there are moving parts, in a team. But my senior year and a little bit my junior year, I did start gaining some football interest. So actually, like a funny story that I tell a lot, I wasn't a very highly recruited guy in either sport. And I felt like in high school, I played at a pretty high level. I played on the top AAU team in the country my junior year, Mass Rivals. It was us and Mocan Elite with Trey Young and Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
So going through the high school process, I was trying to get recruited in both. And those efforts, go a long way. Like the things that me and my dad have done to get in this position have truly been remarkable. And through my high school career, I was the one reaching out to schools, in football and basketball, all Ivy League schools. I was reaching out, trying to get recruited, trying to get my name on the radar, things like that. So sometimes, in the summer, we might attend 6 Ivy League football camps and 4 or 5 basketball camps. And some weekends it might be, and we literally did this. Like wow. Friday night, I would be at a Yale football camp. Saturday morning, I'd be at Princeton basketball camp. And then if there was something on Sunday, we might catch Columbia basketball camp, different things like that. And we were really going one day at a time. Like I sprained my wrist at the Yale football camp Friday night. I went to Princeton the next day, who I had been talking to. And, obviously at that time was a school that I would have definitely gone to. But I sprained my right wrist very bad. So I was out there on the court trying to do everything with my left hand. I couldn't perform, but, it shows the effort. Like we were there trying to get recruited.
Yeah.
The football kind of came more naturally, I guess, to me. Like after I committed to Yale, my junior year of high school, I wasn't focused on football, but the football recruitment happens a little later than basketball. So senior year, I was still getting letters and calls. People were calling my high school coach's office. I had schools like Northwestern, Missouri, Boston College, all the Ivy League schools, and some more local like UMass, Syracuse, that I was receiving like interest from and calls from coaches. It really wasn't anything that I was entertaining, truthfully, but to have that sort of acknowledgement and, that level of like people are interested in me for this sport that I love so deeply. It was super bittersweet when my football career ended, but those memories are something that I hold very tight to me.
You have referenced your dad a few times now, even in this interview, and I want to talk a bit more about that. Tell us about the workouts with your dad. You're a child dribbling in the pouring rain, and you're working on your dribbling and your shooting and under the watchful guise of your father, and extend out to just that relationship, the special one that you and your dad share to this day.
Yeah. I've shared that story. I think this year is the first year that I shared that story, but that's just one of the small stories from me and him training through my life. I'm so appreciative of my dad, truthfully. I don't even know where I would be without his guidance and, his push for me to get better. He's instilled so many values in my life that I apply daily. I'm super grateful. I'm just so thankful for him. Like every shot that I've shot, every skill work, pull up, different drill, he rebounded. So just as many shots as I've shot growing up, he has the same amount of rebounds and passes. He was truthfully there every day and approach workouts in a different way. We spend a lot of our workouts, well, a good portion of time in our workouts, just talking through the game, kind of walking through, visualizing game actions, different reads that might be there, different scoring opportunities, different ways to attack defenses. And that's all of the result of him and his mind for the game. He's super involved in Boston basketball, high school scene. I mean, he's a guy that I'm just super grateful to call my dad. Those tough stories of me as a kid, I've cried a lot of tears growing up training with him, but I don't regret any of it. And it's much deeper than just the training sessions, he's instilled a level of toughness and mental agility and endurance that I'll be able to apply for the rest of my life.
Bring us a little closer, and it's beautiful to hear that. Bring us closer to your actual feelings. I'm just guessing you had countless big games. You've had countless big moments at Yale. What is it like on Father's Day? Like real talk, like just honestly, because I can just hear it and I'm visualizing these scenes. And what is it like on Father's Day for Azar Swain and that relationship with your pops?
Every Father's Day, every birthday, I feel super indebted to him. There's truly no gift that I can give him, and he's treated me as his life's prize, through my whole life, and I just want to reciprocate the love to him, truthfully, and honestly, on those, Father's Days and things like that, his ideal day would start with us in the gym very early in the morning. That's just how he rolls, and that would be, his ideal day. So, I mean, as I've grown up, me and him have gone back and forth on a lot of things, and our relationship has grown, tremendously, especially over my college career. And, all the work that goes into this sport, it's really, formed a bond between me and him that could never be broken. And my love for him just runs so deep, and I truly can't put words to explain him. Anybody who meets him, his name is Azar Swain. Anybody who meets him automatically, loves him, loves his passion for talking to people, and he's a very people person. And like I said, I'm just super grateful and truly lost for words trying to describe him.
Well, as you say, you're at a loss for words. I'm there. At least I'm visualizing, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm sure that our listeners are feeling the same way. You can't help but be touched by Azar Swain and the love that his father has for him, the special relationship that they share. And I think for me, as much as anything, a young man who's just so aware of the gifts that he's been given from his father and his early experiences that are helping him succeed so well at Yale. Powerful stuff. Well, we couldn't do it without you all as we continue to entertain thoughts and ideas, questions, guests, topics to put into the show. We're trying to give you what you need in terms of the content of Ivy League men's basketball in the Ancient Eight, and it's been a joy for us to do so. We want to continue to hear from you. So write into us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com, and we will be sure to respond accordingly and work your thoughts into the show. Now let's get back to Yale's all-time three-point scorer, Azar Swain. Let's pivot now with all of that preparation, that connection that you two have shared in these incredible moments that you have individually. You are in a very, very good basketball program led by James Jones, as we all know. And I feel, Azar, as I've watched your career and this recent version of the Bulldogs, that you guys have this belief that I don't know if other teams have. What does Yale have that others don't? I'm not trying to put you in a spot to speak poorly about other teams, but I'm more interested in knowing how and why your team has a confidence in league play that possibly others don't. What are your huddles like? What's the locker room conversations? Take us there that has you guys having, whether it's a confidence, a swagger, but just a deep-seated belief that, we're just going to do this and figure out a way to beat other teams in this league.
Automatically, it starts from the top. I mean, that's the easy answer. James Jones has built an amazing program and has enabled us with the confidence to be ourselves always, on and off the court. But it really starts with him. He's prepared us throughout the year. He's been in these positions, especially coming into a year like this where we have half the team had never played in a college practice or game. So it was a learning curve, but it starts with him. And I think our confidence and our sort of aura towards the game mentality, it's a culture thing. And Coach James Jones has built that over the years. I feel like when I got to Yale in 2017, our first year, we were a team that had no confidence, really. We were a young team. That was me, Aoni's sophomore year. We had guys like Alex Copeland who were juniors. Paul Atkinson was a freshman along with me. Jordan Bruner was out for the season. We're missing a lot of guys that, we were so young and we lacked that confidence and we lacked that sort of attention to detail and senior leadership, to be honest. So coming into this year, I knew the role that I was going to have on this team, and I knew that I would have to be a leader on and off the court. I have young guys who ask me about things daily, and I just want to give them all the lessons that I've learned to kind of help build that culture.
Right.
You have young guys like Bez Mbang, who's a freshman point guard starting for us. You have Matt Nolan, who's a sophomore, but it's his first year in the Ivy League.
Right.
So for guys like that, in a position that I'm in right now, I just want to give them all the knowledge that I can. I've been through a lot. I feel like I've played every role there is to play in basketball on a basketball team throughout my life, and I feel like I've done certain things and my mind has grown to allow me to adapt my game however I really need to. Like if I'm on the court with a Mie Oni, I can specialize in shooting from the corner, shooting from the three, spacing the floor, playing defense, different things like that. So for this team, I just want to lead those guys. And a lot of the huddles or locker room conversations, when we bring it in close, it's really just me talking to them in a reasonable voice, kind of just being able to calm them down in pressure situations, make sure that their mind is focused on the right things, and maintaining confidence in themselves and their teammates. And that's a culture thing that I've learned from some of the older guys, like I mentioned before, Mie and Jordan Bruner, Blake Reynolds, and I'm just trying to pass that along.
Well, you're doing an excellent job in that, and then some. I have a couple more questions, and we'll let you go, but I want to leave some space for my buddy here. Lawrence, anything come to mind?
Azar, we had William McCormick on not too long ago, and I asked him the same question, and I'd like to pick your brain this time. Can you tell us a little bit about your NCAA tournament experience?
Oh, that was, it's easy to say that that's something I'll never forget, but I truly had no idea what it would be like getting there. When we got there, we were just received with so much love and, and attention, coming from Ivy League. We might lack, national attention here and there. So to be there and kind of represent the league as a whole was a proud moment for a lot of us. And we just wanted to compete on that stage, but we were getting police escorts, staying in nice hotels, things like that. It was truly an amazing experience. And that's what you play for. You play to be playing in that tournament. That's one of the biggest basketball tournaments in the world. As a kid, you grow up dreaming about that. And ever since that game, that's been our mission to get back there. And unfortunately, our last season was cut short because of COVID. And, I want to replicate that feeling, especially for the younger guys on the team who haven't been in that spot yet.
Well, let's pivot a little bit to off the court, possibly. You've been quoted, Azar, as saying, "I wanted to be successful and respected." This is in response to why Yale. Going back to your quote, "I didn't just want to fit in. I wanted to stand out. I want to be in a situation to change a culture and support my family one day. What better place to help me do that than Yale?" So I'll repeat, I want to be in a situation to change a culture. What have you experienced at Yale that is giving you the tools, the lessons, and even the motivation to change a culture?
Yeah, I've grown in so many ways since coming to Yale, and it's exactly what I wanted. Like I wrote that coming into Yale, as a high school senior or whatever, but I've changed and grown in so many different ways. And I feel like Yale has given me the opportunity to learn from a different perspective and learn from all types of people. I've grown my network so much, and I truly, am proud of the network and people that I've been able to meet, of all ages coming from Yale. I've spoken and have a great relationship with a lot of alums who, might be in their 60s, and I'm able to talk to them and have a friendly conversation, laughing and truly connect with that person. And I wasn't able to do that before getting to Yale. I grew up in a low income area, single parent household. My dad went to school in an affluent area of Weston, Massachusetts, where I was, coming in as a middle schooler. I was probably one of 5 Black people in the whole school, and it went from grade 6 to 12. So, being put in situations like that where, I had no choice but to grow have helped me become the person that I am. And Yale just gave me all the resources in the world to kind of be able to go whatever direction I want and grow my mind however I want. That's something that I probably miss the most about Yale is the people that I've been able to meet through Yale and at Yale. They've helped me grow in ways that they probably don't even know, as a person and how I interact with people daily. And I feel like Yale has made me just a better person. And, changing a culture, coming into Yale, and I was touching on that a little bit, in your previous question. The culture starts at the top with Coach James Jones for our program. And coming into Yale, they had one tournament appearance, which was the Baylor victory.
Right.
It was like a 50-year drought or something like that. So I was already committed at that point that they made the tournament. So going to Yale, I knew I'd have the opportunity to always be competitive in the league. And I wanted to build a championship culture. I mean, and we're aiming for 3 straight now. So coming into Yale, that was my goal. And I hope I passed that same winning culture down to the young guys on the team. But, I'm truly grateful for the people that I've met. And all of that is possible because James Jones gave me an opportunity and he believed in me.
And an opportunity, I think all of us watching you from afar, Azar, would say you certainly earned, and you've made the most of it. And I don't know if everyone is necessarily an Ivy Leaguer who's listening to our show, but we all have hopes and dreams. And one of them is to potentially go to college and have a life-changing experience. And it seems to me, don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that Yale's been that for you. Would that be fair?
It changed my life completely. I'm forever indebted to Coach Jones, the coaching staff, a coach who had left, who was the primary recruiter for me, Coach Anthony Goins. He's at BC now, but yeah. I'm forever indebted to those guys. It's really hard to put words to my life, and I'm not trying to think about the whole journey until it's over, but I feel emotional thinking about the journey just because it took so much to get here. Being able to say that I graduated from Yale and having that attached to my name, people look at me in a different light. People talk to me in a different way, a different tone, things like that. I might have more respect. So Yale has changed the trajectory of my family's life. And man, I'm truly just forever indebted to Yale and Coach Jones.
Well, I'm really happy for you and for your family, and appreciative of Coach Jones, but also of Yale University, to acknowledge the greatness and goodness and potential in you, Azar. I am sure that you've contributed to the campus and the program, frankly, and keep this in mind, as much as it has given you, I am positive and certain that you've given back. We are thrilled. This has been an awesome interview to kind of walk through some of your steps, and we hear you loud and clear. Your journey is not over. All right. So we're excited to have more games for you and to see how this whole thing plays out. Before we let you go, we're going to close this interview out the way we always do, which is asking our guests if there's something that you would like to see on your campus, on the group of campuses as a whole in the Ancient Eight, whether it's academically, basketball-wise, but something that you believe could contribute to a better experience for the students, student athletes, coaches, administrators, alums, anything that comes to mind that you would like to see be a positive change in the Ancient Eight.
You know, a few things come to mind. I'm thinking more specifically to Yale, and it's certainly not a knock or anything like that. And I don't know the makeup of other campuses within the H&A, and it's still a struggle. It's been a struggle since I've gotten to Yale, where the workers who work for Yale, and not like in administrative roles or anything like that, but I'm thinking of like the maintenance workers who clean up the dorms and dining halls, and, you know, the people who run the dining halls and things like that. You know, I just want to make sure that they continue to just be paid the proper wage and what they deserve. Through my years, I've heard a couple things where you know, there was a rift between, you know, workers and what they were paying and different, you know, benefits and all that type of stuff. You know, I always want to make sure that those workers are taken care of, because truly they're the backbone of our community, especially here at Yale. And you know, the second point would be something that Coach Jones has touched on a little bit this year, and is a very well-known, I would hope, topic of conversation, but the hiring of more minority coaches. I don't have the exact numbers, but, you know, I do know that there are 2 Black head coaches within the Ivy League, and the amount of minority players to minority coaches, I know it's not even within the H&A, and it's certainly not even across college basketball as a whole. So I just like to see the eventual progression towards the right thing. And I think the right thing is to make sure that there is minority and diversity inclusion, especially when you look at the people who are making up majority of the rosters within that sport. You know, I just want fair opportunities to be given to people who deserve them. And that's certainly an issue all around sports right now, but something that has come to light in my mind, especially given Coach Jones's recent activism with his racism campaign. That's something that I would definitely like to see in the future.
Coach Jones did touch on that, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't give you the same platform in terms of following up on that. You know, I guess maybe some folks would say, well, hey, you know, you want to hire the best person for the job, and let's all kind of understand that there are plenty of qualified people of color for these jobs. So let's think that possibly they need to be a little bit more considered in the processes of hiring folks. So I'll give you that. But I'd like to know, just from your standpoint as a student athlete, how that is impactful. What does it mean to you to have more representation? Or let's just be real. What does it mean to you to have the lack of representation of people of color in these positions?
I'm going to take a step back from that question a little bit, but I think that through my experiences, I feel like diversity has played a very large role in growing my mind and being able to learn from different perspectives and different types of people. Being able to learn and kind of communicate and talk with people who you might not be comfortable with or might not be familiar with, to have a community that's truly diverse and open to working together and working towards a common goal. I mean, that increases, you know, so many different aspects of life. And I've kind of learned that, and that's been an eye-opening life experience for me, kind of being introduced to diversity, like I said, you know, in my high school years, and then coming here to Yale, and obviously still being a minority, but that diversification of knowledge and being able to take in different perspectives, that goes hand in hand with growing, your own knowledge. So I think that applies in sports too. You just want to see all the people who are deserving of opportunities get those opportunities, no matter the color. And it's unfortunate that we're at a place where the representation doesn't show how many people of color might be deserving of jobs, who just might not be considered or don't have certain connections to be considered for certain jobs. And that plays a role into it too. And I know it's not going to change, overnight or even within a couple of years, probably. This is a deep rooted issue that will need constant effort to improve. And I just believe that the diversification of perspectives and people, that coming together truly enhances the knowledge of the group and the individual.
Absolutely. I'm glad you shared that with us. And I'll just say, if it means anything, it's been a pretty consistent theme amongst the folks that we've had on the podcast, whether it's a coach or a student athlete. And so that collective voice needs to be paid attention to. And you can certainly take a guess at where my heart falls on the matter.
Absolutely.
Either way, we greatly appreciate your time. Lawrence and I are thrilled to have you on and to hear from you and learn more about you. And I'm sure our listeners will agree. Yet another great interview from a student athlete in men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. Azar, thank you a ton. Best of luck for the rest of the season and your academics. And we will be following you closely here on the Ivy League Hoops Hour.
Thank you, guys. I truly appreciate you guys taking the time and speaking with me.
Lawrence, we reach into our mailbag and a quick comment that I think is awesome to share with folks. We've pondered a few weeks now in terms of the Ivy Madness. Is it the right setup? And I shared with John and Lawrence my idea last week that if your Ivy League champion, regular season champion, is different than your conference tournament champion, that a great idea would be to have there be a one-game playoff between those winners and send that team along to the NCAA tournament. That, in my mind, would be your best representative for your league, especially in a single bid league, which the Ivy League has historically been. So I posed online and I asked folks what they thought of a regular season champ playing the Ivy League champ in a one-game playoff. And we got a pretty short and succinct reply from Tall Paul 1231. At least that's his handle. In quotes, "No, I don't think so. It's enough extra games as it is," end quote. And I think there is a little bit of fatigue there, folks, in terms of, hey, we want these meaningful games and we don't want them going on and on and on. And I think when you add to the calendar and the schedule, it certainly might seem that way for folks. I'm just trying to come up with the ideal way to put our best foot forward because we have an outstanding league. There's some unbelievable players. The coaches are always solid, well prepared, have recruited well. And I think that shows best on the national stage when we have our best team representing us. Again, especially when it's one bid. So that's what I say. That's what Tall Paul says. What do you say? Please let us know how you think, whatever comes to mind, quite frankly. All right. When it's all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight, write to us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com, and we will be sure to get your content into the show.
It's time for our non-Ivy League nod. Coach, who have you got this week?
I think I've got a good one, Lawrence. I've got Bryce Hamilton, number 13 for the UNLV Running Rebels. He's averaging 21.7 points per game, leading the Mountain West in scoring and ranking 7th in all of Division I in terms of scoring the basketball. He's also second on the team in rebounds at 4.5 per game, and he's chipping in 2 assists per game. 6 30-point games for Bryce Hamilton. It's been fun to watch, and guess what? I'm going to watch in person as I am working for CBS Sports this Wednesday, 10:30 p.m. tip-off, UNLV visiting Fresno State, the Bulldogs, coached by Justin Houston. And Coach Houston has done a great job at getting the Bulldogs to be very competitive, blending a fair amount of transfers. UNLV, Lawrence, they actually have 9 transfers. Bryce Hamilton not being one of them. He has starred for them for a while, and I got a front row seat myself coaching at Air Force as the associate head coach. Hamilton has really grown his game. Super excited to see them in person on Wednesday. So join us if you can make time. 10:30 p.m. on CBS Sports. Additionally, Lawrence, I'll just say that then on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. on USA Network, I'm fortunate enough to see the George Mason Patriots coached by Kim English, a Baltimore native that I know well. He's bringing his team to the Bronx, Rose Hill Gym, the oldest basketball facility in the country, to take on the Fordham Rams, coached by Kyle Neptune. I'll be working that game as well. USA Network, 2:30 p.m. Please join us. And those are my nods of the week.
And now let's spread some love around the Ivy League. Coach, what are you hearing out there?
Well, last week, Lawrence, I highlighted the contributions of Kimberly Newell, Princeton class of 2016, and Maggie Wu, also class of 2016, although a brown bear. And I pointed them out in terms of their efforts to earn a quarterfinal appearance for Team China in women's ice hockey in the Beijing Winter Olympics. Not to be overlooked this week in the battle for the gold medal, I'm highlighting former Dartmouth Big Green team captain Laura Stacy, along with Princeton class of 2020 Claire Thompson and Princeton class of 2024 Sarah Fillier, as they are powering Team Canada into the medal rounds. Stacy, a Montreal native who majored in economics during her all-Ivy career in Hanover, has scored 4 goals and 1 assist. Fillier, a Princeton native who took a year off from her studies this academic year, has recorded 8 goals. And Thompson, a captain on the Ivy Championship team in 2020, has registered 8 assists for Team Canada, this being the highest scoring offense at the games. The stakes are heating up on the ice, and we wish former Ivy Leaguers Stacy, Thompson, and Fillier all the best in what could very well be a showdown with the good old US of A in the gold medal game.
It's time for predictions.
Prediction, Pat.
My record so far, 25-11. Coach, not far behind at 20-16.
Oh, I'm gaining on you, my brother, but you are staying red hot. What do you got this week?
On Friday, February 18th, I've got Princeton over Brown, Harvard over Columbia, Cornell over Dartmouth, and Yale over Penn. The next day, Saturday, February 19th, I've got Penn over Brown, Harvard over Cornell, Dartmouth over Columbia, Princeton on the road gets one back at Yale, and on Tuesday, February 22nd, I'm picking Yale over Dartmouth.
Prediction, Pat. This is tough. Lots of good games, as John Solomon alluded to earlier, Lawrence, and my back is against the wall as I'm trying to close a gap between myself and you. But analytics, my eyes, here's what I'm going for. Princeton beating Brown. I thought that Brown would be limping to the finish line at this point, considering the last couple of weeks, but boy, was that a huge win for them at Cornell. I'm also, kind of suspect about the regular season and how much that matters now with Ivy Madness. But you know what? Ivy Madness is here to stay. And I've got to check myself a bit. The regular season means something in terms of ensuring, one, a berth to the NIT tournament if you can't win the conference tournament, obviously. So the Tigers are staying in the fight. And obviously, I think they're not looking to fall any further behind Penn or Yale. I'm going to say the Tigers get the road win they need to set up an awesome matchup on Saturday. Can Penn spoil the Ivy League regular season highlight, say, between Princeton and Yale that I've been touting all season long? Well, you know what? The Quakers are legit, and it's finally time that I say that. But I don't see them knocking off Yale. Yale is really good at home. They're confident, focused, and they've got a mental toughness that doesn't waver. This could easily be the game of the week. You got to look at Penn versus Yale and Princeton versus Yale. Awesome basketball to showcase the league. Outstanding matchup as I go back to that Friday game between Penn, Jordan Dingle, and Yale, Azar Swain, our last two student athlete interviews on the show. I'm banking on Swain winning the rematch. Yale beats Penn. No doubt Cornell beats Dartmouth. If the game is played in the high 70s or more, the Big Red need to keep that scoring up. Dartmouth is the lowest scoring offense in the league. If they're somehow, some way able to slow down the pace, that could be an interesting game. But for now, I'm going with the Big Red to bounce back and get a much needed win to keep themselves firmly in position of a 4 seed in Ivy Madness. Harvard beats Columbia. No belief, folks, that Columbia can get it done on the road, considering they unfortunately have the worst offensive efficiency of any Ancient Eight team when it comes to going on the road. I think Harvard beats Columbia. As we look at Saturday, I'm going with Brown to win over Penn in a stunner. I'm willing to concede that Brown's Ivy Madness is very slim, but on a whim, I'm thinking that the Quakers will stub their toe for the first time on the road, or actually, I should say, second time. Seems like I'm picking them to go 0 for 2, the Quakers. I'll see if I'm eating crow this time next week. Cornell is better than Harvard, folks, and they'll win the game. Comparable defenses between the two, but more offense, more free throws, more depth, and more assists by Cornell to this point in the season means the Big Red will score more points than Harvard. Columbia loses to Dartmouth. And then we have Princeton, Yale. Princeton, Yale, or Penn, Yale, as I talked about earlier. How those games aren't on one of ESPN's linear platforms, meaning on your TV at home, as part of your regular subscription with ESPN, ESPN2, or you. It's probably a good question for the league office. But oh well, it doesn't mean that me or you or any of our diehard listeners and faithful Ivy Leaguers won't be watching that game closely, and we'll be seeing what the best of the league has to offer. Yale maintains the best scoring defense in league play, along with the best field goal percentage defense versus 2s and 3s. They also have attempted more total free throws than any team in the league. Free points, folks. And Princeton is tied, unfortunately, with Harvard with the fewest attempts in the league. I think the numbers, the home crowd, Yale's form at home, just their energy and belief, all those things come together. The Bulldogs overcome the Tigers. And for that extra Tuesday game where Yale faces off against Dartmouth, I have to say, I think Yale holds its form. I'm trying to spot and see where the next loss is coming. I'm sure it's somewhere around the corner, but then again, James Jones, Azar Swain, and the group, they're holding off all comers. I think they'll be good enough to deal with the Big Green. That's my take. You've heard Lawrence's, and I'm closing the gap. I'm gaining on my guy. But either way, as I always say, don't put too much money on all these picks.
So, Walter, script's pretty good, huh? And he said, the script sucks, kid. I owe my bookie $2 million.
But join us. Let us know who you think is a surefire lock for the top 4 as Ivy Madness gets ever closer. Let us know what you think about the teams, the coaches, the student athletes, and any and all of the topics that we bring up on the show. Write to us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com. We promise, as always, to get your content into the show. Folks, I think that does it for us. Man, do these episodes fly by as Lawrence and I are enjoying every single second. Thank you to Vince Curran. Outstanding recommendations, suggestions in terms of stuff that he'd like to see in the league. Can you imagine that? Army and Navy, two of the most prestigious academic institutions in the country, joining the Ivy League. That would be awesome. And then, of course, we want to have the best officials, not only Friday, but Saturday nights as well. Make sure that these games that are intense and unbelievable, so many coming fast and quick, we want to make sure that they come down to what the players and the coaches have for us and not necessarily a missed or blown call. Thank you, Vince, for weighing in on that. John Solomon joins us, the trio, as we come together for My Eyes Don't Lie to Me and talk about all things men's basketball. And Azar Swain, what a wonderful interview that was. A lot of emotion there for me to hear him talk about not only his relationship with his father, the influence that Yale has had on him, transformative, his relationship with James Jones, and looking out for folks on campus, a young man who is a leader in many different ways, whether it's with his team or looking at some of the social dynamics that are going on at the Yale campus. Couldn't do this without our guests. Of course, Lawrence and I are indebted to them and to you all. Please continue to listen, subscribe, let your family, friends, let them all know about the fun that we're having and encourage them to join us. You and they can also catch us on our YouTube channel, the Ivy League Hoops Hour. And of course, we encourage you always to write into us and let us know how we're doing and what you're feeling. Ivy League Hoops Hour at gmail.com. That's how you can get to us. Again, we're going to reset the table this time next week to talk about all things men's basketball. Please join us on the Ivy League Hoops Hour.
Now, what was the stat you gave? That Brown hasn't scored 82 points?
They haven't scored 82 points, but for 2 games in conference play. And Cornell, going into that game, that was what they were averaging at home.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the life's ironies, Brown scores 81. And how many times have you heard, we just need one stop?
Yeah, good point. Good point,
literally one stop and won the game by 1.
And he said, the script sucks, kid. I owe my bookie $2 million.